Chapter 2. My office hours were in a couple of days, on Friday morning. Apparently, that is when the general liked to dispense justice to her wayward officers. She would run me right in the Singapore embassy during her visit. First Lieutenant Hayward, the JAG defense attorney the legal office had assigned me, did not seem too optimistic or particularly competent. We had only talked via Zoom call, and my confidence was low. It occurred to me that if the head JAG had a clunker of an officer lawyer on his hands, he would not want that guy prosecuting. He might lose, nor have him drawing up wills and powers of attorney. Some wife might get PO'd if things went sideways and contact her congressman. So to the defense office he was sent. But I don't think Clarence Darrow or Atticus Finch could have gotten me a not guilty finding, probably because, I was guilty. I briefly contemplated getting a civilian attorney, but the retainer for the ones I found on the internet was 3 months of my salary, and there was no guarantee the outcome would be materially different from what I would get with the dunce representing me for free. Besides, the civilian attorney wanted me to fly him to Singapore and pay his per diem. So, since the facts were not in my favor, I decided to go with the JAG they assigned me, even though he insisted on calling me Jason. My overall strategy would derive from a line I heard Perry Mason once say: "Take refuge in the truth, even if the truth is not particularly flattering." I had met a woman in Australia while on part of a fact-finding trip associated with my master's I was getting in Singapore, and had behaved, as the charges said, with conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman. I will have much more to say about her later. How did a knuckle-dragging Marine get such a good deal that he was in grad school and taking taxpayer-funded trips to Australian beach resorts? Like the chaplain, I also enlisted prior to becoming an officer. Only I enlisted in the Marine Corps out of high school in rural South Louisiana. My dad was a wildcatting oil man who was killed when a rig toppled on him, and my mother crawled into a bottle soon after that and died. My mom's sister raised me. I think the most charitable description would be grudgingly. So she was extremely relieved when I announced I was enlisting in the Marine Corps. I requested infantry and did my time in the Walking Dead, the nickname for the 1st Battalion, 9th Marine Regiment. My enlistment ended, and I used my GI Bill to attend the University of Houston, where I majored in Chinese. Why Chinese? Why not? Like Yogi Berra said, predictions are hard, especially about the future. I figured China would be a rising power in the world, so I wanted to be able to speak the language and make some deals. While I was a cougar, I met a nice Texas girl down there who turns out was from Ohio and married her. She figured the clever Chinese linguist with a minor in business was going places. How right she was. But as things happened, she was to be desperately unhappy in those places. Then a bunch of Arab fanatics flew planes into buildings in the USA, and I was swept up in the enthusiasm to get into the action. Janice herself did not share my enthusiasm, but she never actively rebelled. But man, could she be sullen. I applied to Marine Corps officer programs and was accepted to OCS, where I did, how to put it, not so good, but still got commissioned. My dad once told me a joke when he saw my report card that went something like, "What do they call the guy who finishes last in medical school?" The answer? Doctor. The Marines sent me to the 6-month-long basic school, where I did much better. Doing well at TBS matters in the Marine Corps because that is where manpower determines what job you will get in the big green machine. Me? I had had a snootful of infantry with The Walking Dead and decided I wanted something else, like intelligence. My experience with Intel was that those guys rode in vans full of computers with air conditioning while the rest of us were marching in the heat and the dust. Clean uniforms with a setup in the rear while everyone else was wallowing forward in the muck. Since I finished at the top of my class, I made a bid for that. The commanding officer of my class at the basic school was not happy about that choice of mine. There were a lot of characters in the Marine Corps, and he was one of them. He liked to sit at his desk wearing his camouflage uniform trousers with no shirt. When he called me into his office at the end of training for our bid interview, that was how he was arrayed. I figured he was proud of that mat of dark hair on his chest and wanted everyone else of lesser rank to admire it. "Stern, we are going to war, and we need proven warriors like you to lead Marines." I'm not sure how proven I was. I spent 4 years at Camp Pendleton in Point South chasing drug lords, and only got shot at twice and hit once. That one time was from a 40mm grenade my buddy managed to fire into the ground directly in front of us while we were shooting at the bad guys. It felt like I had been kicked in the head by a mule. I thought something had bounced off my helmet, but after we killed all the druggies, one of the other guys asked about all the blood running down my face. The corpsman told me to close my eyes and bite down on a strap from my pack, because this is going to hurt a lot. I leaned back and he dumped half a bottle of alcohol on the wound just under my eyebrow. He understated the pain. "I would deaden this site before stitching, but it will only take 2 and I'm down on Novocaine. Can you take it, Corporal?" Every part of me wanted to say, "No!" But the rest of the squad was there, staring goggle-eyed at this exchange, so I said, "Do it." I should have gone with my first instinct of, no. The medal I got was for diving back into a sinking Amtrak, amphibious tractor, off the coast of Colombia and dragging out an unconscious Marine who got caught in the escape scuttle. I was glad I saved Red, Lance Corporal Barron, but only 4 of us walked away from that one. 8 others drowned at the bottom of the bay. I'd been in the fights with those guys, and drowning while trapped was way down the list of how I wanted to go. The tractor mech who forgot to properly seat the seal in the rear hatch happened to be one of the ones who got trapped. I did not quite feel as sorry about him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. All of that would come much later. I tried not to look at the major's sweaty chest hair when I answered. Yes, sir. But I think I can be an asset to the Marine Corps in intel with my language training, and a lesson I learned early was to liberally pepper my conversations with sir. They usually like it. This time, not so much. Language training? He started shouting, so I came to the position of attention. "Knowing where you are going is speaking that ching-chong Charlie crap, you know. They need Arab speakers or whatever they speak in Afghanistan, but not Chinese. We need experienced infantry officers to lead the fight. Urdu and Pashto." He sat forward in his chair and would have hit me with his chest hair had he not been behind the desk. He was red-faced. "What did you just say to me?" "The Afghans speak Urdu and Pashto, sir." Still shouting and now standing. "I don't care if they speak by blowing a trumpet with their buttholes." We both contemplated that statement, and he seemed to calm down. He sat back down and said more evenly, "You should change your selection to infantry." "Respectfully, sir, I would prefer intel." "Get out of my office." Then he spun his chair, and I did a barracks quality about face that no one could see, and marched smartly through the exit. The peacetime infantry for the enlisted was a lot of drudgery, but I did learn an important lesson. The techniques the infantry trains for shooting and hand-to-hand combat are excellent foundations. Master the basics and then be prepared to riff. I read an article about the singer Julie London, who filled my imagination as Dixie on the TV show Emergency, but that is another story. Some interviewer asked her how she got to be so good with her singing, and she said, "Learn the basics from someone better, and never stop trying to improve on what you know." So even though my interview with the company commander did not go so well, he did nothing to prevent me from going into the intelligence field. After graduation from the basic school, my next stop was intelligence school. The Marines train their intelligence officers and their intelligence enlisted Marines at the puzzlingly named Dam Neck Naval Base in Virginia Beach. Half the base was dedicated to schools training combat and intel to Marines and sailors with middling to high intelligence. The brilliant sailors ended up at nuclear school, but I digress. Combat is a space, manned by pasty sailors who stare at screens that display what the ship's sensors are picking up, then fight the ship by pushing the buttons that fire the weapons. We will get to the intel school later. The other half of the base was cordoned off Navy SEAL activity, with its own gate. No one asked and no one told what went on behind that gate. My half of the base was filled with 98-pound weaklings who never saw the sun. That side of the base was full of bronzed men in black shorts who ran a lot. Hard to imagine they had time for anything else since all of them seemed to be running in different directions all the time. But clearly, there was enough time for outstanding training that made them very proficient in all manner of things. But you don't have to believe me. You can ask any of them. They are happy to explain it all to you after you buy the rounds. Dam Neck Intel School was where I learned things like orders of battle, what stuff and troops the enemy has, and IPB, intelligence preparation of the battlefield, or guessing what the enemy will do with their order of battle. What Dam Neck should have taught was how little regard commanding officers have for the intelligence products of second lieutenants, which was just as well, since I did not know what I was talking about in these products either. I realized that CO did not listen to me or any other intel officer for good reason. Once I graduated, my first training with my new command was a force-on-force exercise that featured my Marine squadron attacking a base defended by an Air Force squadron. As part of the exercise, I collected intelligence by interviewing the Air Force Squadron operations officers on the tactics his F-15s would employ. He provided me with a list of dogfighting techniques they would use, like the Level S, the Immelman, and the falling leaf, which I credulously briefed to the Marine pilots. I was nonplussed when they laughed at me as if I had asked for directions to the basement of the Alamo. One of the pilots, who I had known years before as a corporal when I was a private, pulled me aside afterwards and told me that those techniques I briefed had been in vogue during World War I, but weren't much good nowadays. He also gave me a piece of advice. Go talk to the Prowler guys. They fly into the threat and know what will kill them. Trust them, not some Air Force zoomie yanking your chain. Otherwise, good brief, spy. The worthwhile part of that exchange that I added to my learn from someone better was to trust the guys who fly into the threat. After my stint as a Marine Air Group intelligence officer in combat, I looked for something more interesting than regurgitating briefs I picked up from the Prowler backseaters to bored pilots. When we were getting ready to rotate back to the States, I read the Intel Officer Monitor's message soliciting volunteers to graduate school in a foreign country. I could not believe what I was reading. The Marine Corps was looking for volunteers with language proficiency to nominate themselves to attend graduate school in their target language for 2 years as part of a larger Defense Department program. It looked like what the Marines call a good deal. But I figured there was a catch, and, as with every good deal, there was. I called the monitor to ask her about it, and she explained that the student was to participate in other actions as required. I asked her what that was supposed to mean. Who knows? She followed up with what I think is the unofficial motto of people who write orders for officers. Apply for it or don't. I don't really care. I had seen the message that Mandarin was one of the target languages the DoD wanted, and the grad school was in Singapore, so with the monitor's motivation, I figured, what the hell? I put together an application package.